Hello, thank you everyone for attending this Trusted Media Brands panel. I'm Bruce Kelly. I'm the Chief Content Officer and Editor of Reader's Digest. In the next 40 minutes, we'll tackle why brand belonging strategies are important and do so specifically through the lens of social connectedness and community building strategies. We're going to ask if people are longing to belong, and evidence seems to show they are, if they are hungry for authentic communities which social media increasingly doesn't provide them, how can brands help them find the person-to-person interaction, that sense of community that they seek? What kind of communities work best at delivering that connectedness for both consumers and brands? Looking at the success of companies like Starbucks and Airbnb that are built on belonging, that are billion-dollar questions, and our panelists are well suited to wrestle with them. They help lead 3 companies that are among today's innovators in creating community and the belonging we are talking about. I'm going to start with Tatyana Mamut. She's head of product at Nextdoor, which serves as a connector for 250,000 communities, correct me if I'm wrong. I saw the valuation the other day. I won't repeat it or mention the word unicorn, but just saying. Jack Koch of Reddit, head of insights and measurement. He monitors Reddit's 300,000 plus individual communities or subreddits, which have generated, I believe, billions of visits over time. Is that correct?
That's right. That's right.
Ronak Patel, my colleague, Trusted Media Brands Senior Vice President of Marketing, where she steers the strong communities we built around not just Reader's Digest, but Taste of Home and Family Handyman, which are kind of the leaders in home cooking and DIY. I'm going to start the discussion with Jay Walker-Smith. He's the Chief Knowledge Officer at Kantar. He studies how brands can respond to social dislocation. Walker, your most recent white paper throws down the gauntlet and argues strongly that the way smart brands today build deeper relationships with consumers is by first helping them build relationships with each other, which is counterintuitive. What are consumers looking for that you think many brands aren't focusing on? And what's different about these consumers that might be sneaking up on marketers?
Thanks very much for that introduction. Very glad to be here on this interesting panel. This is a subject that we have looked at quite a bit at Kantar. And I think what we see is that people are looking for more connection with other people. And they're not looking for any less connection with brands, but the way I like to put it is to say, if you were to ask somebody what they want to do with their next minute or how they want to spend their next dollar, they're probably not going to say to you, I want more advertising or I want to be more engaged with a brand. They don't want to be any less engaged. They love shopping. They love brands. That's a mistake we sometimes make. But what they're really looking for is more connection with other people in their lives. And I think this is a little bit of the paradox of the times we live in. There's so much that we hear and see about polarization and disconnection that we kind of overlook the fact that right in front of us, almost hiding in plain sight, is this enormous move towards more social connectedness. You know, I could just tick these things off. We have a record number of farmers markets. We live in cafe and coffee shop culture. Festivals are thriving. 10Ks are bigger than ever. These are all kinds of social places where people come to engage with one another. I lived for 30 years in Atlanta, and the Beltline in Atlanta is the biggest thing going on there, and it is essentially an outdoor place for people to come and connect with one another. Social connection is the driving dynamic in this marketplace that brands are overlooking, because brands tend to think about brand to consumer engagement, not people to people interaction. And there's an opportunity to deliver social connection as a benefit that brands are not paying close enough attention to.
So Ronak, I'm going to go to you next because you've written on this topic of social isolation. what are the thought leaders and the most innovative brands that make you go, hey, we need a community-first approach if we're a brand that's going forward?
Yeah, and it ladders back to actually what Walker was saying. We actually conducted an ad perception study a few weeks ago and peeled some fascinating layers of the fact that, community is not a priority on their list. It hasn't hit the masses yet, which is fascinating. But when you actually look at the biggest brands who are the most successful, they are so good at building community. It's actually inherent in their DNA. Brands like Airbnb, Peloton, Starbucks. When you think of those brands, you think community. So I think it's great to follow the model of these big brands who are doing it right, but you also have to make it true to who you are and what your brand is about. And I think that speaks to, I would love to use Nicest Places in America as an example of something that we do exceptionally well in terms of a franchise that we built 3 years ago, just based on the notion that there are legitimately nice places in America that we should surface, because people do care about good people, good communities, and good conversation. And it's grown phenomenally well organically, and we've had a number of impressions through Good Morning America in the past 2 years, but this year we really decided to take a grassroots approach and partner with Nextdoor to tap into their communities and local neighborhoods to create a groundswell of votes of who is or where is the nicest place in America. And so we're super excited about it because it's become a milestone in our company at Trusted Media Brands, and specifically for Reader's Digest because it's so inherent to these brands. In terms of the fact that we're galvanizing communities in new and relevant ways through an editorial franchise. And this year alone, we've had thousands of submissions from people across the nation rallying, saying that their community is the nicest place in America, and we're excited to unveil that in October.
So let's get right into tactics. We have two companies here that are tactically very committed as business models to social connectedness. Let's say a brand out there or an agency decides to invest in social connectedness strategies. How do you control it so that the community you create or join is actually helping people interact as a healthy place? I'm going to go to you, Tatyana.
Sure. So I'm actually going to look out on the audience. If you're looking down at your phone, look up for a minute. Turn to a stranger, maybe somebody next to you. Just turn to a stranger right now. Do it. A stranger, Nick. Nick and turn us, a stranger. And now say hello and say your name. Just do it. Say your name. Say hello. Shake their hand. All right.
Our work is done here.
So, so we came in as strangers. Do you see the energy shift? Now people are smiling. Everybody's looking up from their phones. So there are two things at Nextdoor that we know. The first thing is to really be built on trust. Healthy communities are built on trust. And the way that we do that at Nextdoor is that we verify every member. So right now, you connected with an actual human being, right? We make sure that everyone who comes to our platform is an actual human being at a verified address so that we know that the people that you're talking to on Nextdoor are actually people who live in your neighborhood, who share your common place. And therefore, we build on the power of proximity to drive local connection. So what you just did was when you shifted from the online to the offline mode, it is a fundamentally human interaction. And the real power of Nextdoor as well is to make sure that those online interactions are more and more positive so that the offline interactions can be really generative and that you can meet people and you can friend people in real life that you meet on Nextdoor. So we introduced a few weeks ago the kindness reminder nationwide on Nextdoor. And what that means is it's using machine learning to content classify any comment that is about to get posted. And if it actually is classified as something that may be potentially damaging or negative for the community, a little kindness reminder pops up and asks the member who's about to post to just kind of shift out of their system one thinking, that twitchy kind of nasty kind of mode, and kind of get into their system two thinking. And the message says, please be kind. Remember that you're talking to actual people who are your neighbors. And we've seen a massive shift in behavior change. just by doing that, just by that micro moment interaction of getting people to remember they're talking to real people and shift them into community. So in terms of the tactics, try to connect people face to face. Make sure that the identities of the people that they're interacting with are real. And then when you kind of connect people here, if you actually make a friend in this audience, you'll remember Adweek very fondly, right? And you'll keep talking about that, and the brand will stay top of mind for you.
So Jack, this segues to Reddit really well, which has different strategies but tries to also get to that authentic place. How do you think about it, and how do you think about it in terms of social media? Because social media is, everyone thinks, well, that's what social media does as well. And I think you have a different perspective on that.
Yeah, this is actually a great discussion, because at Reddit we take a different tact. I love everything that we were saying about trust and authenticity, and there are different ways to do it. Now, the person that you spoke to, would you share with them your secrets? Would you share with them if you were going through a medical issue? Would you share with them if you were struggling at college? And that's a lot of us, and everybody's looking for a place to belong. Everybody's looking for people that are going through the same struggles as them. I'm tingling here because I've read a lot of this feedback and a lot of this qualitative research that we've done on this topic, and that's the tactic we take at Reddit. You can be as anonymous as you want to be. It's 330 million people with over 130 active communities that are all sharing authentic conversations and trust, and that's what builds our trust. When we think about safety on the platform, we think about moderation on the platform. We've had 14 years to really cultivate that and how to do it in a way that communities can thrive. We have policies for Reddit. We have communities that have their own policies. And then the moderators are actually Redditors themselves that have built up these communities and built this health. So when they do step in and they do say, hey, this comment might not be right, or it might take a different tact, there's a respect there and there's an understanding. The other thing that happens is upvotes and downvotes are very, very unique to Reddit. So when you do go to Reddit, you are seeing the most relevant content to you based on your passions and your interests at that point in time. And I think it's two very powerful ways to fuel trust and authenticity, and that's how we approach it from the Reddit angle.
So let's go right to what probably a lot of people are asking, which is, what's the ROI on these kinds of activities? These are companies that have built their business models around it, but a lot of brands are out there with a lot to do, as Walker said. It's like 9th on their list, brand blogging. As Ronak said, our own research shows that it's not a highest priority activity yet for marketers. How do you advise brands and marketers to think about and measure ROI on building a community themselves, on joining other people's communities? Does anybody want to kind of just dive in?
Well, I'll say a word, and then they're going to tell you the real answer. So I'll tell you what we advise our clients, and that is, if you ignore a big social trend, you do so at your own peril. And this is an enormous social trend, this desire for social connection. So there is some ROI in it, and really it's imperative for you to do some experiments, to do some testing, to work with some of these platforms to find ways in which your brands can realize some value from some of this. It is an enormous phenomenon in the marketplace, and I think it is something that brands have really got to pay attention to. They're uncomfortable doing this, and that sort of gets to another theme for another day, which is that most value and growth these days is, as we like to say, found in uncomfortable places that are outside the sort of comfort zone of business as usual. But there is something there, and it is something that brands need to focus on.
How do you guys think about that?
Sure.
When you're talking to clients or whether you're talking internally?
Yeah, so one of the things that we see, which is endemic on our platform, are a couple of things, which is community advocacy, so neighbors talking about other brands to other trusted neighbors. So again, when you have these personal and intimate connections and you're, as a brand, coming into a space where people are already recommending brands, right, you're much more likely to get that pickup and to have people actually then start their own organic conversations about your brand. So that's one way. The other thing that we see, which I think is really powerful, we see more and more advertisers take a dual approach. For example, Home Depot ran some ads on our platform, which were around DIY workshops for kids in their local stores. And you would click on it. I've got images of this if anybody wants to see it after the panel. You would click on the ad, and it would bring up the actual local DIY workshop that you could sign your kid up for. At the same time, we have a for sale and free section where we can ingest the catalog and actually show Home Depot products, right? So kind of driving that brand belonging and that brand affinity, right, through bringing online to offline interactions, driving people in the store, getting them to connect with their community when they go to those workshops. But then you also have the down funnel activity, which is actually purchasing the Home Depot products in another part of the app. And those two things, and that sort of ecosystem of driving both brand affinity and local action are really powerful for advertisers within our platform.
Yeah, absolutely. Community is an interesting place because there's an organic part to community, and then there's the paid part, right? So the way we teach community marketing, which is different than social marketing, which is important, is you first want to be able to listen what's being said on the platform, then you want to learn from that, and then you want to take action. And the way you take action is you provide value to the community. That's how you foster healthy conversations, and again, you provide value, and that's how you're going to build that authenticity and trust. And what we do find is when you do that, just like you found as well, you do become a trusted area for learning about new products and brands. We released some research recently which found that communities like Reddit were as trusted as Google and Amazon rather than in the social platforms and that sort of trust. So it really does breed that authenticity. Regards to the measurement, which I love that Walker's on this panel, we work with Kantar quite a bit on that.
Yeah.
It's important to know that the ROI on the platform can be measured, both of our platforms can be measured, all three of our platforms, can be measured in the same way that other media buys are happening. That's number one. We also have additional aspects such as authenticity and trust that we can tap into. And then number three, our vast first-party data can relate to you the trends that are happening, the conversations that are happening, and really give a nice 360 view of what's happening on the platform so you can inform your marketing strategies not only on Reddit or Nextdoor, wherever it might be, but everywhere. Your TV strategy, your print strategy, whatever it might be, and that's really powerful. And that's the information that you can only get from communities and community conversations.
Yeah, and in terms of ROI, I'm a firm believer. I mean, going back to Field of Dreams, if you build it, they will come. And these are building healthy, meaningful communities. And at Trusted Brands, we have, at Taste of Home, we're the OG of UGC. And I'd like to claim stake to that one because it's a food brand.
We'll talk.
Yeah. Got it. So at Taste of Home, we have users that actually submit their recipes, and we surface them through our magazine and our digital sites and social. And Reader's Digest, it's really the power of the human story, and it's a multi-generational area of a solid community that spans generations. And then also, Family Handyman is a brand of doers, and they just love to tackle home improvement projects day in and day out. And so we've reached these communities at scale. We've actively talked to them, and it's a net benefit in terms of a real symbiotic relationship. If you're engaging with these communities consistently and serving up relevant content, especially from a publisher perspective, the insights that you get back are invaluable. And then there's a brand perspective of brands who are actually not that great at building authentic communities. So they partner with publishers like us to speak to them in relevant ways.
Can I say one more thing, actually, following up on Jack's point, which is there's been, over the last, I would say, 10 years since Amazon started doing the stars program, the proliferation of stars to recommend products, it's just kind of overwhelmed people, right?
Yeah.
And I think another trend that we're seeing is that people want to get away from these, this has 2,000 stars, but this has 3,000 stars, but this only has 12 stars. What does that mean for people, right? One trusted recommendation from a neighbor or from somebody that you've been talking to on a community who understands you, that one trusted recommendation is worth more than 3,000 stars, right? And so that's the other way that community marketing and the ROI of focusing on, again, connecting people to each other, creating that trust between them, and then having them really advocate for your brand. Like hopefully you'll advocate for Adweek now because you'll meet a friend in the audience, right? So that mechanism is really important for brands in the future.
So Walker, I want to spin away from your various business models to what you see out in the marketplace.
Sure.
You're dealing with clients, all of you. You are hearing what ad agencies are saying about why they're not going to advertise with you, or why they are, or why they're going to join in. Who gets it, and why do they get it? And I'm going to start with you, Walker.
Well, I think the companies that get it are those really that have their ear to the ground. I don't think it's any more complicated than that. They really do understand that more and more people are looking for social connection. I'll offer you sort of one perspective on that. We've just been talking about trust. We have certainly seen over a very long period of time, since the mid-1960s in fact, that trust and identification with big institutional entities has been on a long-term decline. It goes up and down a little bit, but it's been on a long-term decline. It has been replaced in the last 10-ish years by smaller communities. We refer to these as smaller worlds. These are more intimate connections where a specific recommendation from somebody you trust within your smaller network is somebody that you'll rely on. Now, there are good things and bad things about this, but from a brand perspective, you know, we like to say trust doesn't come from authority anymore, it comes from intimacy. And so when you say that, that takes brands to an uncomfortable place. That's kind of like, oh gosh, my traditional ways of operating, my traditional models for communicating are based upon me using my authority, me declaring that I can be trusted and I've got all this expertise that proves my authority to make that declaration, when in fact people are just saying, you know, I want this kind of intimate connection that I really trust more these days. And so I think, you know, brands are struggling to figure out this kind of different model of operating. But the brands that get it are those that are starting to pioneer different kinds of ways of connecting with consumers.
Any examples?
Well, sure. I mean, my favorite example to give is one that I'm sure everyone in this room has seen, and that's Capital One banks. You know, they've partnered with Pete's Coffee to open coffee shops. So, you know, when they first started doing this, you'd scratch your head and go, who is going to go into a Capital One coffee shop to have a cup of coffee? Right? Yeah. And of course, this was debated a lot internally at Capital One. It blew through all of their internal metrics of success, and it's been so successful for them that they've been converting more and more of their storefronts, and they've launched this national advertising campaign around it that you see in various flights off and on. And this is all about establishing a more intimate network within which you can do your banking business. You know, it's not the sterile, institutional, intimidating kind of engagement of the past. It's much more intimate. You do it over a cup of coffee, and that kind of social connection seems to have been very successful for them.
I think they're just to jump off that point. There's this big word called scale that we all use in the advertising community, and it's overused just like data is. And what clients really want to do is target the right audience. And that comes more to the micro level enthusiast communities, right? You get more bang for your buck. And one example of that is we're beta testing a new franchise, which I can't mention just yet, for Taste of Home around the insights that our consumers love baking. So we simply just launched a Facebook community around baking, and it's really taken off. These consumers love to share about their baking tips, and we're actually using what they're saying to inform our content strategy. I'm proud to say that we actually have a big food brand as a sponsor for the holidays, but micro communities are extremely powerful in making a one-to-one connection to your target consumer.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so Jack, you have some perspectives on this, I know, because you've tried to convince advertisers, and with some growing success, to be parts of communities, but they're interacting with them in different ways. So what are some examples of some clients that, or some advertisers that have really gotten it and made it work?
Absolutely. Before I go into that, just to feed off your point, absolutely. Can't agree more. You know, we talk about demographics and psychographics all day long, but micro communities or communities in general are, it is the deep interest-based targeting that brands are looking to to get to when people are looking for something specific. They're in those communities for that reason. So as brands become more familiar, as they start learning the ROI, as we teach them how to market within communities, I think we'll start seeing this really snowball. A brand that did it really well when we talk about the organic versus paid, I want to bring up Chipotle. Everybody knows Chipotle in this audience. You smile, you laugh when you hear Chipotle. They did a great listen, learn, activate strategy. They listened to the organic community. The community was wondering about ingredients and why you can only get certain ingredients in different areas of the country. Queso, for example, you all might wonder why you can't get queso in New York. So the head chef went online with a paid Ask Me Anything, AMA, you all may know that, and went through all of this. And it was one of our most successful AMAs ever, really, and going through all the different reasons why certain ingredients are here, what he particularly likes, his favorite food, all of these sort of things. And now they're so active on the platform, not only do they have a great organic presence, but now they do a great paid strategy where they are now developing food items based on Reddit communities, like keto, for example. So they're a brand that has really taken hold of this strategy of community, activating community, providing value, and fostering the healthy growth and conversation.
So I just want to say this is relatively new, and so finding the micro community that matters for your brand and then really experimenting along the way with what works is the way to go. So, at Nextdoor, preference is one aspect. We really kind of double down on proximity over preference. So getting people together who are in small micro communities, their neighborhoods, based on their own mental model of the world, and kind of driving action in that way. So there are three categories that experiment in different ways on our platform. The first is global supply and local demand. So if you're a brand that's struggling with global supply and local demand, which is basically any retailer, you might want to experiment with Nextdoor in the way that Target and Home Depot have, which is really creating targeted micro messages to the neighborhood, neighborhood by neighborhood, right? So, on July 4th weekend, do you advertise July 4th? Do you advertise Gay Pride? Do you advertise, schools out for summer? It depends on the community, right, that you're targeting. So that's one way to do it. The second is global supply. Sorry, so it's local supply and global demand. So, for example, Airbnb is experimenting on our platform, right? Because their local supply is the hosts, right? Which live in small neighborhoods around the country, and they want to target in different ways. And then the other one is obviously local supply and local demand. So Edward Jones is experimenting on our platform with their agents. State Farm is experimenting as well about how do they target those micro communities and actually link them up to their local agents on the ground. And there's lots of ways to activate local communities and to activate neighbors to participate with brands in new ways.
So these have been valuable insights into how a brand could partner with the folks on this stage. But I want to ask you guys to get outside of your own business and to talk to marketers about how, if they were going to do it themselves, DIY their community growth, like what tips would you have for them? I mean, it's a hard thing. You don't know what's being marketed, and but I just am kind of curious that when you take your hat off, besides saying, come partner with us, like how do brands think about their own internal attempts to fledgling to create communities like this?
So I think the first is know your customer and listen to the customers and understand what is meaningful to them. Know where the authentic conversations are happening that are meaningful to your brand and where those organic communities are being created. And if there's a place that you can actually foster, create a platform for that community to emerge and for more trust to be built, right? That's the way to kind of enter into that conversation, is what is the platform for local action and local interaction and trusted interactions that can actually drive your brand. So know your customer, make sure that you understand what's important to them, not what's important to you. Create metrics based on what's important to them, not what's important to you. Thank you for bringing up engagement metrics, which is only important to your brand, not important to your customers. And then start to really find and identify the communities where they are organically.
And that's the uncomfortable part that you were talking about.
Yeah,
correct?
that's right. Yeah.
Yeah.
And we say to brands, you know, we have a little wheel that we use. We call it our wheel of social currency. You know, places where you can come, offer a place, or partner for a place. So this is our 4 Ps of social currency, if you will, so they don't always sort of work. And then give people things they can push or things they can say to other people, things that they can share. It doesn't have to be a conversation. A conversation is something we refer to as partnering. How can people partner with other people? Have a dialogue. And then the final is, of these 4 Ps, is something we call participation, which is simply having a place where people can come and compare themselves or benchmark themselves against a group. You know, it might be like an athletic group where you see how good your performance is relative to group. All of those are forms of social currency that brands could offer to consumers.
I just have a quick point to make. I think building authentic communities takes time.
Yes.
It does. So you have to be really invested in that commitment to it. But if you're trying to build it quicker, partner with the right partner. I would say Nextdoor was the perfect partner for us for Nicest Places because we wanted to really build a grassroots groundswell around this editorial franchise. We didn't want it to be as splashy as it was in the past. We wanted it to be authentic and connect to communities, and Nextdoor was it. So it's just a perfect example of finding the right partner to build those authentic communities.
Yeah, I would say what's important is to recognize the difference between social marketing and community marketing. And there's a time and place for both. Both do different things. They have different KPIs. They have different objectives. For the community, you know, we've been saying it today, listen, learn, activate. And as Tatyana said, I mean, the honesty of the crowd is worth more than a single influencer's recommendation. And what you'll see from that is those offline conversations. You'll see people talking about taking the conversations they're having online, bringing them offline, and turning that into purchases. And that's what we've seen from the consumer journey. Again, there's a time and place for both in the media mix, but just make sure community marketing is in the media mix and isolated as something that somebody does have to focus on.
That's wonderful. So we're at the point where questions are either going to pop up or there's going to be a mic. I'm not sure what's happening. Where are we on?
There we go.
Oh, there we go. Okay, first one, key advice for connecting with brand communities. This kind of allows you to kind of riff a little bit more that I guess I would target that at when brands build their community, how are consumers going to get the belonging that they want out of it? How do consumers get that feeling that we've talked about that is in deficit?
I can just take it very quickly. At Reddit, these communities exist. It's not so much the brand creates them, but for example, Google-Fi will already exist, or Amazon will already exist, or Fiat will already exist. But for a brand to really connect with their consumers in those communities or their audience, it really does come back down to value and not advertising. Product updates, interesting or informative conversation, really not talking at the community, but talking with the community, taking feedback, letting them know that they're heard, but doing whatever you can to foster that community. And again, it comes back to the listen, learn, activate in those communities. But even at the end of the day, it comes back to value more than advertising in that sense. And providing, again, something that's interesting, informative, and keeps them in the know, we find keeps advertising from being fleeting to being actually creating that influence and that discovery in those actions.
Any other questions?
Oh,
There we go.
okay.
How can small businesses make community marketing feel more authentic on a limited budget?
I'll take that one. So we have a great local business platform. In fact, a great number of our recommendations are neighbors recommending small and local businesses to one another. We were just talking about the Find a Plumber, the Find a Great Cafe, all of those types of things. So we have, and we're continuing to build a platform for local businesses to thrive and to connect with their neighborhoods and their neighbors. Their most loyal customers are the people who are around them and who are proximate. So we have a platform for helping local businesses on a very limited budget figure out who they want to talk to, how do they want to message, what's the radius that they want to target, and it really live updates the price that you will pay based on the number of people, based on the number of neighbors that you want to talk to. So Nextdoor is a great platform for local businesses, small businesses on a limited budget to really kind of reach their potentially most loyal customers, which are the people around them, right? So, and then again, drive that community advocacy by creating recommendations on the site. We have business pages which are free and which allow local businesses to interact with their communities, which is a completely free platform to claim your business page and then get recommendations from neighbors.
That must have been come from a plant. Was that a plant question?
It was not. It was an anonymous question, who knows?
How would you go about rebuilding trust in a community where maybe trust was previously lost?
Well, that's a big social issue right now. Is how do you rebuild trust? So the practical answer to that is make a small promise. Keep it. Make another small promise and keep it. Just keep making these promises that you're going to keep. And you'll rebuild your trust over time. It doesn't happen very quickly. Losing trust is a very serious issue. There's been a lot of work done in the academic circles about the impact and the cost of lost trust to a business. So it is an asset that should be very tightly guarded and protected. But once you've lost it, the way to rebuild it is to begin by reproving to people that you're going to do what you say. And what we recommend to our clients to think about is to go through this process of not making big promises, but making small promises and then keeping those small promises one after another, proving that you can be true to your word, which is really a lot of what trust is all about. And this comes through intimate connections. This doesn't come through big authoritative statements. And that's why brands have got to sort of master this community, this social connectedness of these kinds of smaller networks in which people are immersed these days.
That's, I think, a good way to wrap up. I appreciate everybody being here, and I hope you guys have enjoyed it, and I hope it's inspired you to think a little bit differently about marketing. Thanks.